So what Hobbes wants to point out to us, right, is, well, we are these simple creatures with appetites and aversions. We tend to go towards what we like and away from that which we don't like. And we're limited in terms of this sort of weak faculty of rationality. Ultimately, what we want is not just what we want, but the ability to reliably get whatever it is that I want. So, for example, I don't just want a hamburger with no pickles. I want to be able to, whenever I want, have a hamburger with no pickles, right? So, ultimately, what Hobbes puts forth for us is this conception of power that ultimately defines what we want, right? Because we're not just reactive creatures. I'm hungry, therefore I go towards food. I'm thirsty, therefore I go towards water, right? I want to know that my hunger will be sated tomorrow, the next day, next week, next month, for as long as I live, right? So ultimately what we want, rather than just immediately what we want, is, right, what he defines as our present means to attain some future apparent good. Right? The means to reliably get whatever it is that we want. Right? Now, straight out of the womb, like in the woods, without all of this technology and society around us, because we can't, if we're considering ourselves as animals and asking what kind of animal we are, what we have to look to is original power. Right? This is what we're born with. This is our bare bones basic resources, and it amounts to basically our faculties of body and mind. We've already seen with the intellectual virtues and vices that, well, in terms of our faculty of mind, right, we're born with a certain kind of common sense and ability to reason clearly about causes, make conceptual distinctions, that sort of thing, right? And this helps us get what we want. But that faculty of wit, right, our natural wit, our natural common sense, can be enhanced through education in the right use of speech, the right use of reason, right, which allows us to make more delicate and complicated conceptual distinctions. Right? It's the deal, or it's the difference between just trying to survive in the woods or having taken a survival course, right? So that you know, right, what plants are called, which ones are poisonous, which ones aren't. You can make that distinction because you know the names and you know the properties that associate with all of the names, etc. Right? Well, it's no different in terms of our physical brawn, our natural, our original power when it comes to our faculty of body, right? So our original power just has to do with what we're born with, right? Our natural wit and our strength, our agility, our speed, etc., 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 right? Now, instrumental power, right, Hobbes tells us, is acquired through the use of our original power, right? So, for example, if I wanted to dig a hole, if I did it with my hands, that would be, well, stupid and take me a long time, right? But if I have a shovel, right, an instrument to use in order to help me dig this hole, it's going to go a whole lot quicker and easier, right? Better yet, if I had a backhoe, that's a quick hole, right? So, right, our original power is enhanced through the use of this instrumental power, right? And this works too. If I were to move all of my furniture, right, there are pieces of furniture that I would not be able to move on my own. But if I hop on the phone and I call my buddy Ed and say, hey, I've got this couch that needs to be moved, he'll come over and he'll help me, right? So original power can be enhanced not only in terms of body and mind, but socially as well, right? Which brings us to chapter 11 on manners, right? He tells us manners are those qualities of mankind that concern their living together in peace and unity, right? Now, this should be a little bit confusing to you because he's just laid out a conception of human nature in which we are desire-oriented, fairly feeble reasoning creatures who are ultimately out for number one and power-hungry. Right? I don't want what I want when I want it. Right? I want the ability to get whatever I want whenever I want it. Right? So he's laid out a conception of us that is, largely selfish, greedy, self-interested. Right? And it's really hard to argue throughout all of this with him, because he starts so simply, because I do like what I like. I don't like what I don't like. Right? My faculty of reason really does seem to work the way that he describes it. And in terms of what I want, he's right. I don't just want this thing right now. I want the ability to have whatever I want whenever I want it. If I like to travel, I want the ability to travel whenever I want. Right? If I like to eat some kind of food, I want to be able to have that kind of food whenever I want. Right? So ultimately, right, what he's laid out is this ends the puppy dogs and ice creams portion of this course. Right? We're not basically good creatures. We're basically selfish, self-interested creatures by Hobbes' estimation. And then he turns to these qualities of mankind that concern their living together in peace and unity. Manners. What are manners good for? Right? Well, the same thing anything's good for in Hobbes, getting us what we want. Right? He wants to point out to us that there is no absolute good. Remember, good and evil came down to expressions of appetite and aversion. I call good whatever I like. I call evil whatever I don't like. Right? And what's more, right, since we're such nasty, desirous creatures, all of our voluntary action is aimed at trying to get more power. Right? So on page 161 of your text, he puts forth famously as a general inclination of all mankind, a perpetual and restless desire that for power after power that ceases only in death. But if this is the case, why do we live together in peace and unity? Why would we be polite to one another? Why would we be kind to one another? To get what we want, Hobbes claims. Hobbes claims that, basically, right, all of the reasons that we want to live together in peace and unity come down to these selfish motives. Right? He points them out here. We want to keep and assure the power that we have. We fear losing it to a superior foe. If I've got lots of friends, people are less likely to challenge me for what power I've got. We want competition and its trappings, honor, riches, command, etc. under a common law. When we're living together in peace and unity, right, competition is sort of consistent. Right? Without a common law, which kind of gives us rules to follow in terms of competition, right, it's not consistent. Right? And we can't reliably get what we want. Right? We want the ease of a social order and the protection for industry and labor, not to mention life and limb. We simply want to build lives for ourselves, and we don't want our stuff taken by a superior foe. This is why we live together in peace and unity. And ultimately, we want knowledge and leisure, but if we spend all of our time fighting for more and more power against everyone that we encounter, then what we find is that, well, we don't really get to attain much power because we're spending all of our time defending ourselves. Right? So ultimately, manners, the reason we live together in peace and unity, the reason we're kind to one another, right, is because we're selfish. Right? So if I'm nice to you, it's because I am furthering my attempts to attain power. Right? If somebody offers you something, it's because they want something from you. Right? If it's true that the general inclination of all mankind is a restless and ceaseless desire for power after power that ceases only in death, right, then what we find in Hobbes is no immediate moral way out of this dilemma. Anytime anybody's nice to us, they want something.